Hello, everybody, and welcome to our next session, which is a pre-recorded fireside chat talking about the promises and the challenges of gene therapy for rare diseases. It's going to feature gene therapy pioneer, Professor Gaspar. He joins Professor Tim Cox from the University of Cambridge, and also Georgina Morton from the Archangel MLD Trust, whose daughter joined a clinical trial of gene therapy in 2014. So for now, the presenters will come back for a discussion afterwards, but for now, please enjoy this video of their fireside discussion. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to this meeting, a fireside chat about gene therapy for RAREfest 2020, which is supported and organised by Cambridge Rare Disease Network. We're not quite by our fires, but we're certainly looking forward to a very important chat. It's my job just to introduce this, and we have some really fabulous discussions coming ahead with two people very much involved in gene therapy and the care of patients who benefit from gene therapy or will do. So first of all, I'm going to introduce Professor Bobby Gaspar at University College, and now in another position as Chief Executive Officer of a very large British gene therapy company just founded and coming into light now. This is Orchard Therapeutics. Bobby.
Thank you very much, Tim. And it's a real pleasure to be involved in RAREfest and to be able to talk about this field. So just by way of introduction, I'm an academic physician by training. I was professor of pediatrics and immunology at UCL in Great Ormond Street Hospital. I've spent over 25 years in the field of immune deficiencies initially, and really trying to develop new ways of treating those conditions through gene therapy. And through that work and the results that we showed, we wanted to move it from academia and the clinical setting really to become an approved medicine that could be used by patients worldwide. And so that's how Orchard came into being. And to a certain extent, I followed that journey, and very reluctantly, I have to say, had to stop my clinical practice, but step into into Orchard, where I'm now CEO. And it's really always been about trying to develop what are the best treatments for individuals with these very severe rare disease with very limited treatment possibilities. And I hope that gene therapy can offer something for these conditions. And so it's great to be able to chat to you about that.
Thank you very much, Bobby. Yes, that's every academic's dream, is to be able to actually do something.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. And now, of course, to go to Georgina Morton, who is the CEO of a wonderful charity in Britain, Archangel MLD Trust. And Georgina, tell us about your journey and what you're seeking to do, please, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Professor Cox. So I am chairperson of Archangel MLD Trust. We're a relatively young organisation. We were established in 2014, and in fact, I spent my entire career before I'd ever heard of MLD or gene therapy as a television producer. The reason for such a gear change is my daughter Ava. She's now 13, but she was diagnosed with the early juvenile form of MLD in 2013. In 2014, she was fortunate enough to take part in the clinical trial for gene therapy for MLD in Italy. And as a result of that, we really wanted to give something back. So we set up a charity. We were named after Archangel Raphael, who towers above Ospedale San Raffaele in Milan, where she had her treatment. And we had three very simple aims: to support medical teams around the world working on treatments for MLD, and to try and help more children get to the gene therapy trial. We wanted to award grants to families who unfortunately couldn't access the treatment at that point. So we wanted to help make the lives of MLD affected children easier, more comfortable with therapy and equipment and respite care for parents. And the main thing that I took away from the gene therapy experience was we needed to push to have all babies tested for MLD at birth so they have the best possible chance of intervention.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And you may be young, but you're doing a huge amount and bringing your media skills, really, really wonderful to this. Well, thank you very much. This promises to be very new and revealing about the magic of gene therapy. Just for me to say a few words of introduction to the concept of rare diseases and gene therapy, for they are, in a sense, very linked. Rare diseases, I think everyone who knows the many people who are in this meeting and this chat will know that they are very frequent. There are things in common with rare diseases, the difficulties, the alienations, the problems of access to opinions and care. But also each one is, I don't know, it's a galaxy within the universe. And the universe is pretty big. And the galaxy, each disease has its own qualities, its own special signals. So something shared and something special, but the unifying thing really, which is perhaps the glimpse of hope that's been there for so long and now turning so productively into action, is that so many genetic diseases are rare diseases, and so many rare diseases, ultra rare diseases even, that no one's ever heard of, are genetic and have a clear single gene basis which can be addressed. So the magic that we're looking for always, that keeps us going, which is being realized again now, has had a long time for gene therapy putting back the missing function or addressing its toxic effects in some way. And that's something that follows the science of molecular biology and medicine now. But doing it is not so easy, and it's been a 50-year journey. And it's only just now that we're beginning to see the first real successes which drive the whole field along and all the investors. So it's a very long journey, and we're very fortunate to have both of you who've experienced both aspects of this to talk to us. So perhaps I can go to Bobby, Professor Gaspar, to ask him if he could tell us a little bit about, in broad terms, the different approaches to gene therapy today.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you for presenting that background. And you're absolutely right. I mean, in the field of rare diseases, there are certain aspects that make them, I suppose, good targets for gene therapy, in that in many rare diseases, there is a single gene that is defective. And a lot of work over the years has come to understand what that specific gene problem is, which cells that gene affects, which tissues are abnormal. So that's very important, because if there is one single gene that you can identify as being problematic, then you know that maybe by replacing it, then you can have some form of beneficial effect. So it's more tractable than maybe some more complex diseases where there are maybe multiple genes or there's an environmental issue, etc. So a single gene being defective makes it much more amenable to gene therapy. I think the other really important thing is that we are often dealing with conditions where there's a high level of morbidity, there's a high disease burden, and there are very few treatment options. And so we're really looking to offer something where really there isn't anything else available. And I think, you know, when we go to any kind of intervention, we need to understand the benefit risk profile. So having said that, you know, the field of gene therapy is you know, it is as you said, there's a galaxy of diseases and there's a galaxy of gene therapy. I kind of almost like to think of it as a toolbox. So gene therapy is a toolbox, and there are multiple different tools, and you have to think what is the right tool for that particular disease. So when we think about the disease, what is the gene that is missing? What is the cell or the tissue type that is defective and we need to correct, or where we need to introduce the gene? And what is the right tool for fixing that particular cell or tissue? So if we think about it in that way, and so you have multiple different tools. The field that I've been involved in for over 25 years now is a field of what we call hematopoietic stem cell gene therapy, or blood stem cell gene therapy. And I really got into it through looking at some very severe immune deficiencies. So children who were born without an immune system and who really had no way of fighting the infections that surround us, and often had very poor lifespans. And what we understood at that time was you could do a bone marrow transplant, which is taking somebody else's blood stem cells to grow a new immune system. But in fact, why not use the child's own blood stem cells and introduce a working copy of the gene into those blood stem cells and then give it back to the children so that they now had a working copy of the gene in those cells that could then build a new immune system. And so with my great friend and colleague, Professor Adrian Thrasher at UCL Great Ormond Street, we started some of the first studies to show that you could actually do this first in the laboratory and then in patients. And we saw some, really remarkable successes from those early studies. In fact, the first child that we treated was in 2001, who now, 19 years later, still comes back with a functional immune system. But it told us that by introducing a working copy of the gene into those blood stem cells, you could really have a dramatic effect. And so that we've lived through the as in any new therapy, there are always highs and lows and challenges that you have to overcome, and we've been able to do that. But I think what we understood was you could do this not only for certain immune deficiencies, but because of the way blood stem cells develop, you could also address hemoglobinopathies like thalassemia, but also you could take this to some very severe neurometabolic conditions called lysosomal storage diseases. And because these blood stem cells traffic to the brain, you could deliver the missing gene to the brain as well. And so this field has really developed over that time period. And as you rightly say, Tim, we're really seeing the benefits of that in some approved therapies, some approved gene therapies that are now approved as genetic medicines that can be used by patients in the US, in Europe, and hopefully worldwide as well. And I will just finally just make the point that, that was one of the reasons for me to go to found Orchard and to be part of Orchard in order to bring these things to patients. But we've had a recent success in a condition called in MLD, Metachromatic Leukodystrophy, where for the first time the European Medicines Agency has given a positive opinion for HSC gene therapy for MLD. And and Georgina will be able to talk about this more, but this is such a devastating condition with no treatment opportunities. And now this type of gene therapy is really able to offer a treatment for that condition where really there wasn't anything before. But it shows you what can be done. And I just hope we can do this for more diseases.
Thank you very much, Bobby. We'll come back to you a little bit later on this, of course. And thank you to give us that perspective and the conditions, some of them that you've been dealing with. So thank you very much. Georgina, you're the other aspect of this. You know a lot about it. You know about it more than anybody. Tell us, if you wouldn't mind, really how you look at this and how you see it at the moment.
Well, I think it's only thanks to the dedication of clinicians like yourself and Professor Gaspar and scientists and industry, their dedication to conquering rare diseases that, we've got this opportunity. In my opinion, gene therapy has, the potential to change our children's lives and the future of medicine itself. I knew nothing about gene therapy when my daughter was diagnosed with MLD. My husband and I, we had great jobs, we had a very comfortable lifestyle. We had no idea about the horrors that lurked within our genes. And just to give you a little bit of the backstory, I had two, perfectly happy, healthy children. But around the age of 4, my younger daughter, Ava, she started to trip up a lot. And we didn't really think anything of it. But then we noticed she started having issues with her fine motor skills. She would get a bit frustrated when she went to put a lid on a pen or do up a zipper. So we took her to have a child development assessment. She ran through all the tests and we were told absolutely nothing to worry about. She's probably got a mild case of dyspraxia, a little bit of occupational therapy, and she'll be fine. Then she started school and her teachers noticed that her hands would sometimes shake when she went to pick up a pencil. And when they said this to me, I thought, I've noticed that sometimes at home as well, when she's gone for a knife or fork, for example. It isn't all the time, but it was sometimes perceptible. So we had her checked out again. Again, we were told nothing to worry about, but I really pushed. And we had an MRI and we had a lot of blood work and the result of many months investigation. And a doctor called us in and said, look, Ava has got something called Metrochromatic Leukodystrophy. I've never heard of it, but what I can tell you is there is no treatment available. She's going to lose all of her abilities and she will not make it to teenage. Well, we couldn't accept this because to look at Ava, you know, she was running, she was swimming, she was cycling. To look at her, you wouldn't see anything wrong. So we turned to Dr. Google and we read up on Metrochromatic Leukodystrophy, and it was utterly devastating reading. You know, we read Ava was going to lose the ability to walk, to talk, to swallow, to see, to hear. She was going to get dementia, and she was very unlikely to live past, childhood. So this was absolutely devastating. However, thanks to the internet, we also found hope. We discovered a clinical trial for gene therapy for MLD was underway in Milan. And we looked at this and we didn't know anything about gene therapy, but we understood it was a bone marrow transplant without a donor, that would remove a huge amount of risk associated with a graft versus host, etc. We then felt that by some miracle, this trial had chosen MLD out of many conditions they could have chosen to test the theory. The awful thing about MLD is it's a very aggressive condition and can progress very, very rapidly. Children can lose their ability very quickly. We know families who from first symptoms in the late infantile version to their children losing the majority of their ability has been a matter of months. So, you know, the disease once it takes hold can be catastrophic. So when we found this clinical trial and that there may be some form of hope and some chance that Ava could take the treatment, it was like winning the lottery. It wasn't a straightforward process getting accepted onto the trial. Ava had to go through a huge amount of assessment to prove that she was only mildly symptomatic and that the treatment was going to benefit her. There was also a delay because the viral vector that had been developed for the treatment to deliver the treatment was made in small amounts, and so we had to wait for that to become available. But we were incredibly lucky, and in 2014, Ava was the 12th child in the world to receive this treatment. We met all of the children who'd gone before her, and they were doing remarkably well. You know, we'd gone into this knowing nothing about rare disease, knowing nothing about any kind of treatment, having had two really healthy children up to this point. And we just didn't know what to expect. But we met these other children, most of whom had been diagnosed as a younger sibling of a child who had advanced disease, who was too progressed to be able to be helped, but a new sibling who was pre-symptomatic. Most of them had received the treatment at that stage, and they were all doing remarkably well. And children who were showing no signs of the disease at the age when their elder sibling was either completely incapacitated or even had passed away. So this was really promising for us and really encouraging for us as parents, taking a leap into the unknown, as it were. So Ava with the early juvenile form and with mild symptoms, and also being checked at the age of 7 by this point. We didn't really know what her outcome would be, but it was promising. We went to Italy and we spent about 4.5 months there in total. Ava spent 56 days in an isolation unit. So great training for lockdown several years later. She received a fairly harsh regime of chemotherapy, and then the doctors took out some bone marrow. They corrected her faulty DNA in the lab, and then they put it back in. And then we just had to sit tight and wait to see what would happen. Now, we were warned that the treatment, like any bone marrow transplant, wouldn't work immediately, that it could take up to 12 months to become fully effective. And at that point, Ava still had active disease in her system, and it would be a race between the disease and the therapy as to, you know, who came out on top. Ava did have some disease progression in that 12-month window post-transplant. The disease did carry on attacking her nervous system, and she has lost the ability to walk, and her processing speed and speech have slowed down. However, her transplant was a success. She now consistently produces 10 times more of the typical level of the previously missing enzyme. And for the last 4 years, her disease has been totally stable. We've even seen some small but important signs of recovery. We're really pragmatic about Ava's prognosis and that she may never recover any of her lost abilities, but we've clearly altered the natural course of her disease, which gives us real cause for hope for the future. You know, Ava's got a great quality of life. She goes to school every day, which she really enjoys. You know, she's really happy. Being in a wheelchair doesn't really prevent her from doing anything. She's great. And now, at this point, we've met over 30 children who've received this treatment, both through the clinical trial and subsequent to that on compassionate grounds. And I think, you know, what we know of them and what we've seen with our own eyes is that they and Ava have all essentially proved the point that the earlier the intervention, the better the outcome. You know, and whilst incredible medical advances like this are being made all the time, you know, what has pulled me into the charity is that most children are sadly still diagnosed at a point where it's too late for them to be helped. Right.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, that's so important. And I'm sure the business of screening and so on will come out in our discussions. And thank you. It's very important and very moving to hear that. Georgina, thank you. I mean, we haven't got a great deal of time, but just very quickly to say, perhaps there will be a chance, Bobby, for you to tell us about some of the other modes of therapy, the tissues, and how it's looking at the moment more generally. I would say what comes out to me from your speech, talk, Georgina, was the power of the informed patient as reflected through their carers and family very often in these diseases, what you can do, how you can change things, how it's actually always about the patient, the centrality, you know, in the triangle, of course, not just for symbolic reasons of compassion, but of those who are engaged with it and who suffer it and know it every day is absolutely critical and is there. And so the goal of therapy, gene therapy, whatever therapy, molecular therapies today, provided it works dramatically and transformatively, it will be funded, there will be access, it will work. And the patient organization, as well as the investigators, the doctors, the scientists who are involved, and the companies, all have to know that, feel it, work with it, and be a unified whole, because it's through that we learn so much and we do so much, and it's a win-win situation. So that would be my way to almost finish. I think we've got about 3 or 4 minutes just to say, I think I'll perhaps go to Bobby, if I may. How does the future look for you, Bobby? I mean, you're a chief executive of a very big British company now in the field, which is wonderful for us and fully deserved. But tell us honestly, how does it look for you, the future, in a few words? How do you look at it?
Well, I think there's a couple of points really, and thank you very much, Tim. I mean, you've kind of framed a number of different things. I do think the centrality is absolutely important. You know, at the heart of all of this has to be the patient and the family and the disease. And are we doing the best thing for the child, for the family, and really making an impact on that disease? And if we're doing something that really fundamentally changes the course of that disease through our therapy, then everybody will win out. I think that's the important thing. The families and the patients will benefit. The investigators, the clinicians will have something to offer to their patients. And if it goes into industry, then it will become a valuable medicine. And I mean valuable in all kinds of different ways. And if it makes that kind of difference, then clearly, there is a very strong case for access for patients as well. But I think it has to be dependent on the quantum of change that you can make. And that is what we should all be striving for. In the case of MLD, I think there is something here that is potentially curative, and that is a very, very strong word to say. And I don't say it lightly, but I think that's what we can do. I think the other point I would really like to make is that the outcomes for these very severe rare diseases is dependent upon effective therapies and early diagnosis. And the two must go hand in hand in order to change those lives. And Georgina said it so eloquently, but that has got to be central. And that's why something like newborn screening for these conditions is so important. We have the technology to be able to do that. We should be pushing as strongly as possible to implement newborn screening for a number of diseases where it fulfills the appropriate criteria. And I personally think that we are moving too slowly in the UK as far as that is concerned. And that's why I've been involved in SCID newborn screening. I want to help with MLD newborn screening. But I think ally early diagnosis and screening with an effective therapy, and that fundamentally changes lives.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Well said. Georgina, last words to you.
I agree wholeheartedly with Professor Gaspar. Newborn screening is absolutely crucial to children being able to access such incredible medical developments as gene therapy. We also need the health system to pay for these treatments and to understand that in the assessment of new therapies like this, that perhaps they don't fit into their assessment processes. We're pushing to have gene therapy available for MLD diagnosed children in the UK, but that won't happen unless we have the financial support to put that in place.
Sure. Well, it does happen for molecular therapies. The National Institute for Healthcare and Clinical Excellence does look at things, value for the NHS, and with a transformative therapy, so far, many of those therapies that have been approved seem to be coming through, and not just on the health economics, but seem to be as part of a society funded. But of course, this is something that the triangle, as you point out, and which you can argue for, is so important. Yeah. But absolutely, thank you for that. Newborn screening, we are a little bit almost scandalously behind. It's complex, of course, in many things, but let's hope that we can drive that and take a fresh look with a modern eye of our very conservative attitude to it. It's going to take work, but I'm sure the case can be argued where the therapies are like magic, really.
Yeah.
Or they're a hope of magic rather than just there and have some efficacy. Transformative is a good word. Yeah. And I think probably we're going to hand over some questions. There are going to be some questions coming up, of course, from everyone very soon. Unless you have something very burning to say, we're all bubbling over with this. Perhaps I should thank you both very, very much. Georgina, CEO and founder of Archangel Trust, and Professor Bobby Gaspar, academic, clinician, and now CEO, really driving things forward for a company in the UK that has such a good platform for the future. So unless there's anything else, thank you all very much. We'll be taking some questions.
That was such a fascinating and a very important conversation. It really does feel that there's hope for the future, that there can be transformation for patients and their families, although we do clearly have a long way to go and many challenges to be overcome. Now I'm going to hand back to Professor Tim Cox in real life, after that recorded discussion, to lead a chat with Bobby and Georgina. So please do put your questions in the Q&A. I can see you've been very busy already, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing this discussion. So Tim, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Kat, for that. Thank you. Thank you very much for Kat. So just quickly to reintroduce the panel, just to get the names, it's Georgina Morton, who is CEO of the Archangel MLD Trust, and also the mother, of course, of Ava, as we've heard, and Professor Bobby Gaspar, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Orchard Therapeutics, but also a professor at University College London as a result of all his academic work over so many years, which he continues. So what a panel, and we've attracted a lot of questions. And perhaps I can just quickly run in, because time, as always, is of the evidence, as the pressure. So do people realize, well, this is David says, do people realize just how common rare diseases are? Individual rare diseases have the problem of being unknown and magnified, but they are actually, of course, as a group, such a burden. So it's just an observation, really. And, you know, Bobby, you've dealt with quite a few. Any comments on that one? Just, are they as common?
Yeah.
Rare as we think? It's a conundrum.
No, that's right, and together they are more common. And I think, you know, I did a lot of work at Great Ormond Street in rare diseases, and of course, you know, lots of children with rare diseases come to Great Ormond Street, and we even, you know, set up a centre at Great Ormond Street, the Centre for Research into Rare Diseases of Childhood, and that was really because there are so many of these diseases around, and with increasing diagnostics and awareness, we're able to identify more and more of these conditions and the genetic background behind these conditions. And of course, that then affords us better insights into mechanisms and ways of being able to treat those conditions. In fact, the statistics are that, you know, it's approximately 1 in 17 individuals would have a rare disease of some sort. So, you know, that's kind of, it becomes a very much, you know, a much more common
yes. Yes. There's another question, if I may. Thank you for that, which I'm actually going to go straight to this. In the nitty gritty, as it were, the actual mechanics of gene therapy trials. Steve has raised an interesting point. Why are gene therapy trials, trials for gene therapy, so much shorter generally than those, as it say, for normal drugs, for the usual sort of drug trials for hypertension, diabetes, that sort of thing? Why so much shorter, and are they so much shorter?
It might be that they're, maybe I can take that first of all. It comes down to the fact that for the majority of gene therapy trials that are being conducted at the moment, they are for rare diseases. And so just because they're for rare diseases, we can't enroll thousands and thousands of individuals, because there aren't so many of those individuals out there. So they're usually confined, they have so far been confined to rare diseases. There are smaller numbers of patients that can be accessed for trials. The trials are done on sometimes just 10, 20, 30 patients. It might sometimes take a longer time to recruit those individuals because of the rarity of the disease. So I think those are the kind of considerations that you have to take. But I think as we are getting better at doing these studies, and if we can find the appropriate gene therapy for a rare disease, then perhaps through patient registries and, you know, support organizations, we can identify patients for trials much more quickly, so that those trials can be conducted in a shorter time frame.
So you're looking at the formative element, and of course the intensity of knowledge in a small lot is actually an advantage, isn't it? So you can get a quick result for your very defined target once you know ambitiously what you can change and even maybe reverse. Georgina, on this one a bit, there's so many questions. There is one, actually, a more general one, and I'll come then to the more specific. So Ron Jointner raises, how do we solve the economic conundrum for gene therapies for rare disease? I mean, some of the therapies, you know, the models in the financial world, I know this myself, are extremely set very, very high. The cost, you know, of the therapy is very high indeed, and people balk at that, or it's invidious in some way. You'll have a comment on that, Georgina, and you mentioned it earlier, and maybe also Bobby can too, and I'll give my 2 pennyworth, if I may, at the end. So Georgina, how do we solve the economics?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand that although the cost of gene therapy may seem, you know, pretty high compared to some other treatments, it is a one-off treatment. And compared to the cost of supporting a child who hasn't been TRET, you know, if you do the numbers and you look at all of the medications that are required, all of the visits to hospital, all of the hospital stays, all of the extra support that parents need in terms of carers, because these children need round-the-clock support, all of the extra equipment that they need, that is a huge burden on the health service. And equally, we must take into consideration the huge repercussions that happen with families financially. Not only are they having to fill the gaps that the health service cannot fund, you know, through my charity, we fund extra equipment, wheelchairs, you know, extra physiotherapy, that kind of thing that parents feel their children really need. But also parents have to give up work, they lose their income, you know, and there are repercussions. There's also an argument that we have to take into consideration the cost of the damage this causes to families, relationships break down.
So the human cost, Georgina.
Siblings are massively impacted.
Yeah,
and
the
so
human cost.
I think when you weigh up all of that combined devastation compared to a one-off cost, you know, for me, it's a no-brainer.
And Bobby, what would you say to that? Thank you.
Well, I think Georgina has very, you know, eloquently captured the human cost that goes with such devastating conditions and the toll that it takes upon not only the child, obviously, but the family and the kind of the ecosystem that forms around the child in terms of the care that needs to be supplied both within the home and outside as well. I think, you know, when you apply just the kind of very objective metrics to some of these therapies, that like the MLD therapy that's being that has now been developed, the quantum of difference it makes to the child compared to what happens now is just enormous. And in fact, if you apply the types of methodologies like QALYs, and when you apply that, this therapy has more QALYs associated with it than any other therapy that's been approved, just because the difference it makes is so huge.
Okay.
And I think the other aspect of it is the fact that we currently do have therapies that cost an enormous amount, but they're given every week, every month, every year, and they continue to be given over the lifetime of that individual.
Yes.
Whereas now we're talking, and we are prepared to do that, and
that's correct.
Rightly so.
Yeah.
But now we're talking about a single administration of a therapy that can last potentially a lifetime.
Right.
And so we're not used to doing that. We're not used to, you know, this is a paradigm shift in the way we think about these.
Well, they are actually, Bobby, just to chip in, we do hip transplants,
yes,
and we do liver transplants and heart transplants, and we do bone marrow transplantation.
Correct.
It's just that the same people who ask the economic questions have never had they've not actually any knowledge of what life is actually about in these one-off therapies. There is a model, of course, but it has to be. Okay, and there's never been a fixed budget for health, has there? It's just a pretend, of course. You can always argue for more. It's a societal problem. So thank you. That's very good. I'm just very conscious of the time. We've got 2 minutes, allegedly. Here's one about the screening, actually, which is so important, if I may. This is from Lydia, and you mentioned that the UK is quite behind in screening, and this is a big barrier for patients when it comes to assessing gene therapy trials and so on. What are the biggest challenges stopping the implementation of more high-yield, widespread newborn screening for rare diseases? Where's the blocks, Georgina? Really, where's the block?
I think, unfortunately, the UK process for assessing conditions to be added onto our heel prick isn't keeping up with the developments in science and technology and that, you know, we're all talking about today. I think a lot of the criteria is being interpreted in a slightly different way to how it is in other countries, because many other countries are screening for way more conditions than we are, yet we're all using the same criteria. So I think our system really does need to be reviewed, because we have situations like Professor Gaspar has been in with SCID, where it is a debate going on for years and years, and that's inappropriate.
So it's a question, of course, of the people.
Yeah, there are treatments out there which children cannot access, and that is wrong. We need to review the system. Okay, thanks a lot. Now, sorry, I really feel the pressure of time. Someone says, can gene therapy only stop progression of disease? Can it help repair things where there's damage already occurred? That's from Caroline.
I think it all depends on the disease. And I think it's all about, you know, the disease that you're dealing with, the kind of the mechanism, how the disease affects that particular tissue or organ. And sometimes we're stopping things from deteriorating, and other times we can help repair or build things. So I'll just take two examples. In MLD, we are trying to preserve what is already there. So we're trying to preserve the function of the brain and stop it from deteriorating. And if we get there early, then when everything is already normal, we can keep it normal. In SCID, for example, where there is nothing there, where the immune system hasn't developed, we can build a new immune system. So that's building what is preserving. So it depends on the disease.
Yes, of course. And a question of knowing disease and getting there at the right time, of course, which is so important. There's a lovely question here. We've been given a little more time, but that doesn't mean to say we can be loose. So here's a very general question, I think really for CDRN and what it's about, from Dana actually. So it is, what recommendations or insight do we have for medical practitioners, all of us? Okay, let's start with you, Bobby, on this one. Based on your experience and expertise, how can we enlighten? How can we have this, the constant complaint, it takes ages to make a diagnosis. They said there was nothing wrong, and so on and so forth. Can you teach rare diseases, or what do you do, Bobby? I have my ideas, but what do you do? Do you just say they're stupid, they don't know anything? Or how do you help people get to the root of a disease for a complaining patient or a struggling family? How do you do it?
I'll put forward two thoughts on this difficult and wide-ranging topic. Education and education are the two main words. So number one, education at medical school, right from the beginning, kind of give a broad outlook. But I think the main thing, and again, this is kind of, I'm just thinking very out loud here. The technology is already there. I mean, the kind of the bioinformatics, the artificial intelligence, etc. We don't have to have, us limited humans don't have to have the whole textbook in our heads. It's there, in the form of bioinformatic searches and everything else. And we should be educating our medical students, our GPs, our doctors, to be able to use more of that kind of search technology to be able to identify these rare diseases. I mean, if you can just put in the kind of the signs, symptoms into an algorithm, you'll come out with a series of diagnoses. And then you can start to think about, how you do the test for those different diagnoses. It should get better. It really should.
There's one other thing, Bobby, if I could say. It's attitude, isn't it? It's persistence, the desire to do it. If I don't know what it is, but I'll see you again, please bring them back. We'll do a few more tests. I'll talk to a colleague.
You're absolutely right.
That must also be part of this. And I'm afraid the pressure of the circumstances doesn't always include that, but essentially it comes to those sort of things, Georgina. I would say you're a really living example. You know what's happened and hasn't happened with your interactions with the healthcare system.
Absolutely. And I think, yes, we had a difficult diagnostic journey. However, I've subsequently learned through speaking to lots of other families that it was relatively quick, 10 months, and other families have faced years and years of being you'll be neurotic, go away, it's nothing to worry about, bad behavior, all kids, develop at different rates, go away, let's look again at the age of 6 when they should all be around about the same. And by that point, actually, for most kids, it's way too late. So it's just awareness.
We're putting it right. We know what's wrong, but it's putting it right. It's awareness and the desire to do it. Perhaps, and the professional attitude and the openness. That's good. So we've got Will, and David hasn't told me to shut up yet. So here we are. What have we got? We have behind in the newborn screening. We are behind. And I just don't know how you drive that, Bobby. You've got such success. I had a preventable disease, a nutritional disease, a bit like phenylketonuria, that was easily corrected by diet. They also wanted trials and pilot experiments and so on and so forth before they even consider it. This is an incredibly rigid and very unusual thing. Only 9 diseases, I think, are screened for, actually, something like that. Out of quite a few of the list, maybe up to about 60 or more, that we already know are worthwhile screening young. So, and in other countries are.
So I mean, I think it just
whose hand are we going to? Whose shoulders? Who's are we going to shake?
Okay. So I mean, it is incredibly frustrating and difficult. So just to pick up on the previous point,
yeah,
we can take that diagnostic odyssey away if we are screening, because the diagnosis is made at birth, and you then have the knowledge to be able to act right at the beginning without having to go through the tribulations that Georgina and so many other families have had to go through to get to a diagnosis. So that's one thing. I've been waiting 10 years for SCID screening to be implemented in the UK. I wrote the first letter to the UK National Screening Committee in October 2011. The pilot will start next year. 10 years. 10 years later.
All right.
In that time, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Norway, Sweden, the Netherlands, France, the whole of the United States are screening for SCID, and we still haven't screened a single baby.
So, shame.
So there has to be change. There has to be change in the UK, and it has now got to a political level, I think, to kind of shake a few trees in order to make this happen.
Wonderfully said. I must finish. I'm very, very grateful. I think we're all very grateful. There's something for everyone to take away, actually, from you, Georgina. Thank you so much. Very moving, very, very impressive, informative for us all. And Bobby, thank you for your vision and for, that sort of focused energy and
thank you.
drive to make things better. We wish you all the very best with your big company, UK company in gene therapy. So thank you very much, everybody. I think it's time to wrap up now and probably back to Kate, but thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much to Tim Cox, Bobby Gaspar and Georgina Morton. Now, I will be back here at 3 p.m. on track 1, hosting a live chat with Professor Giles Yeo from the University of Cambridge, talking about how understanding rare forms of obesity can help to shed light on weight and health for all. So please do join us for that. Now, for families and children, please do head over to track 2 to join 10-year-old Dana Perella from the US, who set up her own charity, Cookies for Cures. She will be demonstrating live cookie decorating and talking more about her work. That's at 3:15 on track 2. And if you'd like to join in, you can find the ingredients list in Dana's Cookies for Cures exhibit in the exhibition hall. But if you'd like to stay here on track 1, we'll be back at 3 p.m. with a live chat from Professor Giles Yeo from the University of Cambridge. So please do join me then. Thank you.
Thank you.